Okay, so this is MQTT integration with Drupal. I'm Will Jackson. I work remotely from Aiken, South Carolina. I work for a company called Canopy Studios, where I'm a Drupal tech lead, and I'm a tech and electronics enthusiast. And I've been working with Drupal for about 12 years now. So diving right in, what is MQTT? So MQTT is stands for Message Queuing Telemetry Transport. It's essentially a lightweight published subscribed network protocol that transport messages between devices. It's designed for connections with remote locations where small code footprint is required, network bandwidth is limited, or even something like low power situations too. So there are it's a very efficient means to transmit messages between devices. Some of the architecture. So you would generally have an MQTT broker. This generally would be a server. So if if we're thinking like Drupal and Apache and that sort of thing, it's a service. So Mosquito is one. I think it's by Mosquito. Eclipse. So there is, it's the Eclipse Foundation. They have Mosquito, which is an open source MQTT broker service that you can run on Linux and lots of other applications. But the broker essentially acts as a hub between clients, devices that are retrieving a subscription or even publishing them. So if you have, say, small devices in the field, in this case, in this example, this is a device that's essentially publishing a temperature reading, and it's just publishing that temperature reading back to the broker or the server, if you will. And then other devices, so computers, or you could have other IoT devices would also be connected to the broker, and they would be reaching out to the broker to get the most recent message for a particular subscription. And so that's going to be the subscription, and then computers can also publish back to this. So on the wrong browser here. Okay, so MQTT with Drupal. There's a few places you can get the code that we're going to check out today. As mentioned, this is currently a work in progress. Everything right now is on my GitHub page. So just github.com/willjackson/MQTT. That is everything that we're going to be taking a look at today. The eventual home is going to be drupal.org/project/MQTT. There are a few items that need to be resolved. We're switching over to new library is the major thing, but essentially just fleshing out some more of the functionality with the some of the dependencies and things that we're working with on that. So eventually we'll be on MQ or D.O, drupal.org/project/MQTT. But for now, you can check out the GitHub page. So while we would want to integrate Drupal in MQTT, sensor logging is a big thing. So just being able to pull in remote devices, remote IoT devices that are pulling sensor data, being able to interact with that, grab that data, and pull that into Drupal for a number of reasons. Data tracking and graphing. So one of those reasons could be that you're graphing that data. So if you're thinking temperature or humidity or something like that, you don't want to track that over a given period of time. So this will be a way in which you can save that and actually retrieve that and view that in a more visual way, other than or bringing that into Drupal and then doing more Drupal things with it. Automation control via Drupal. So I was thinking some examples. I mean, there could be a lot of things with this. Currently with Drupal 8 or the Drupal 8 version, there's rules integration that will be going away with Drupal 9. It'll be going to custom events and subscriptions within Drupal there. But getting away from rules, it was just, I come from a Drupal, 5, 6, 7 background. So I mean, I've been working in Drupal for a long time. So going into Drupal 8, I was like, oh, rules, that's just the way to do this. That's just how it's best support, and it works. It's just terrible. So there's, I mean, it still does an okay job, but just the UI and just kind of what you're able to do with it in Drupal 8 is just nowhere near as flexible as it used to be in Drupal 7 or in earlier versions, for good reason. I mean, there's better options out there now. So going to get into that, but but for what we're going to look at today is there is rules support. So that's why we'll see that. So yeah, just diving right in, I guess we'll get into the live demo. That's the main thing here. So I have a very basic Drupal 8 install, 0 content. And the only thing that I have installed is the MQTT module. And now what that's going to do is if I go to content and then go to MQTT, we'll see brokers and subscriptions. So similar to that architecture model, we have the broker, which will be, kind of like the content hub or the data hub, if you will. Everything will be pulled into there. And then in this case, the Drupal site itself will be a device, we'll be pulling it from the MQTT service. Now to kind of step back a little bit, I'm running everything is running on, I'm using Doxel. So I've done presentations on that in the past, but essentially what we have here is, there are 4 containers, so I've got CLI and a web or a database container and then a web server container. So this is running my Apache, this is running MariaDB, and this is just my, I think it's like Arch that it's using, but this is Doxel and just sort of a generic LAMP stack. The only thing I have extra is this Mosquito container. So this is essentially running acting as my broker. That's the service that's running in the whole setup. And this service here, this container is what will be receiving data and where that's coming into. So that's acting as the broker in this situation. So if I go into brokers and I look at my test server, because it's just for testing, if I select edit, there's a host address Mosquito. So since this is using Doxel, Doxel is handling DNS, and I have a DNS set up for Mosquito there. Rather than having to type an IP address, that may change a lot, and you have to go look it up. Let Doxel handle the DNS. I just call it Mosquito, and then it'll automatically handle that for me. The port, so this will be the internal port, and if we kind of go back and take a look at this again here too, so it's exposing port 1883, and that's just that's what we're going to connect to. We actually are exposing port 1884 on the actual network. We'll dive deeper in that too once we start getting to some of the sensor module itself. So yeah, going back to the broker, I don't have a username password here. It says published. Actually, the release of the module, I changed this to be enabled because this is a content entity. Just by default, it has published. So there's a little bit of cleanup we got to do with the module for release it live. But this is sort of the basic setup for the broker. And then going back to the top level here, by going to subscriptions, we're looking at 2 things: temperature and humidity. I'll get more specific into where those are coming from. But for right now, we're just give it a subscription name, test/temperature, and the broker. We just select the broker that we have saved. So we create our own broker, set that up as sort of the initial. That's the server, and then once we have that set up, then we're able to go and create subscriptions to that broker, so we'll be able to connect to that and pull down from there. So. Now getting into where these are coming from, so temperature and humidity. What I have here is it's just a little module. How well you can see that, but this is if you're familiar with Arduinos or you've heard of them, it's similar to that. It's actually a Wemos D1 Mini. Similar to like a Node MCU, but the cool thing about this is it allows you to take Arduino code, and it has a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip just built into it. So, I could set this up to connect to my home network automatically whenever it boots up. And then whenever it boots up, it's going to just take the little blue thing up at the top. That's they call it DHT11. It's just a basic, really simple temperature and humidity sensor. That's all it does. It pulls that data, sends it to the board, the development board, and then whatever code you have set up on this board, it'll just react. So we'll take a look at that real quick just so we can kind of get an idea. So what we're looking at here is this is the Arduino IDE. And essentially this is all the code that is running on this little board here. And this is the part where I was saying I'm going to have some things I'll have to blur out. So, but yeah, so you basically just set up your Wi-Fi SSID, your password, and then the server itself. So this is essentially just my development server. So where I'm running Doxel, where I'm running that. So this could really be anywhere on the internet. In this case, I'm just running it locally. So for development. So I've got that set here.
What language is this?
So this is Arduino. I think this is this own thing. I think it's like this base. It's a derivative of C. Arduino.
Okay, I was like, it looks a lot like C, but also
Sketch. Let's see.
Okay, if it's Arduino, that's good enough. I was just super curious. Okay.
Yeah, it's just an Arduino sketch. So there's let's see. Yeah, so it's just very similar to C. It's like a derivative of C, language. Yeah, so it's its own thing. It's simplified. It's a lot of it's abstracted. Pretty easy to get into. All right, so
Will, are you going to talk more about the port number again? I didn't quite follow that part.
Yeah, absolutely. So the port numbers, we have this set up. So this is running Doxel. So are you familiar with Doxel or Lando or anything like that?
I've not heard of Doxel before, but I understand the container. I understand what's running. Okay. What's running there. It's just some way to manage several of them at a time.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's an abstraction layer for Docker Compose. And it just makes it a little easier to it's a wrapper for Docker Compose, but they're Docker containers, and in Docker Compose is a way to wire up lots of containers sort of together as a bigger package. And then what Doxel does, because that does get kind of complex when you start getting into Docker Compose and just sort of how you can wire everything up, Doxel makes that more simple to approach. So it handles a lot of things for you automatically, things like DNS stuff that you would generally have to get pretty involved with. So that's what this would do. So that, for example, we have for the web, it's exposing port 80 and port 443 for HTTP, and then there is a Doxel itself. They have their own container that gets run to that essentially takes the request like URL name and then matches that to a virtual host that's running on like a container. But Mqtt doesn't have that, so we have to do something a little bit different. So that's why this one's just looks a little different than here. So what I'm doing in this case is I'm manually specifying port 1884 on this project, and then that is just essentially terminating to. Almost think of it kind of like port forwarding on a router or something. Right. So it's it's listening on port 1884, but then it's going to forward it to port 1883. And 1883, that's just a generic port. Similar to how Apache non-HTTPS is going to be port 80, and 443 for HTTPS. Port 1883 is just the kind of generic MQTT or Mqtt port. So yeah, 1884. That's just what I'm changing in here. So that would be if I wanted to ping the IP of my development server on my network, and then the listening port, is 1884, and then it'll just terminate that to 1883 on the back end of the container, so it can connect to it. Yeah, so just kind of going over this code, there's some extra stuff in here. So I actually have a web server, which I'll kind of gloss over, but it's not really needed for this project. It's just more for testing and making sure the sensor is working like it should. So, basic setup information. I've got a few extra things here. So I've got a humidity topic and a temperature topic. In short, what this is going to do, it's going to boot up. It's going to grab the data from those sensors, and then it's going to, down here, it's essentially just going to publish, it's going to go through a timeout, and it's just going to publish the temperature and the humidity from the sensor to that Mqtt server. And so this thing is not, actually here, so this is not plugged in right now, but I will go ahead and plug it in and just power it on. And it's just USB power, so it's just like 5 volts power is all it requires, and it boots up very quick. Once it's boot up, now I can just drop into this Mqtt container. So fin bash Mqtt, and then there's this Mqtt command, Mqtt sub. Basically, you're going to listen to anything that's test. That's going to be a wildcard. So basically, anything that's test / it'll come back. So yeah, so it's pretty warm in my office. So it's 78 degrees Fahrenheit now. Humidity is 33, and every so often it's just going to keep submitting that, pinging that, pushing that back to the broker, in this case Mqtt. So I'll let this run, and I can actually just show you too. If you blow into, like, the humidity is 33% relative humidity, but if I blow into it, we should see it rise. One, it'll probably jump up here on the next time. Oh, it jumped the temperature up. So, but anyway, you get the idea there. So yeah, I'm kind of dry from just talking for the, yeah, there we go, 37. It just jumped up there. So yeah, so you get the idea. I mean, it's recording it in real time, and it's just constantly pushing that back to the MQTT broker. So what we have set up in Drupal is then you can add, so we've already added the broker, which is essentially just connecting to that service. Now that service doesn't have to be on a container. That service can be on a DigitalOcean, Rackspace container, or server, really anywhere. I mean, there's dedicated MQTT providers out there too, where they'll just store that data for you. So it could be anywhere on the internet that it has access to. So once we added the broker, then we add a subscription. I'll just edit one of these existing subscriptions again. Only thing I have is just test temperature, and here's test humidity. That's there. So now if we go into this, if I click into one of these, we'll see that I've got a graph. And this graph, so it's 75. I think it's still 75. So we should start seeing this. So this graph gets updated every time cron runs. Now on this demo site, I have cron running a lot more frequently than it should be. I think it's every 3 minutes is how it's set to. But it's just, the only thing is running on the site's that, so it's not a huge deal, but it's a little lower than your typical production environment for a website would be. But in this case, the only thing the site's doing is grabbing that data and pulling it back. So what we can do is just go into the status report page, and I can run cron manually, and actually just ran. I'll run it again though. And let that run. And so now every time that cron runs, it will essentially rebuild, or not rebuild, but it'll add a new entry to, there's a file that gets added here. So if we added that, we saw that file. I'll go back to that in a moment. But so yeah, I just updated that file by me blowing into the sensor there. I sort of artificially raised that to 82 degrees on that board, but this is pulling it in from from the MQTT broker, from the server itself, and it's just essentially redisplaying that to the page. Now this data is getting saved. The way I have it set up right now is being saved as a CSV file because it's a lot of data that would be saved there. And in some cases, you may, I mean, every 3 minutes is my application, but you may need to do it once a minute, once every 10 seconds, or you know, a lot more frequently. So a file would better handle those larger, or that was a thought anyway. The file, the CSV file, would better handle that sort of data rather than putting into the database. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do potentially with this was to bring it, or at least have the option to save it in the database versus a file, in case you didn't have something as you know, demanding as you know, tracking data for, you know, maybe years and years on end. But you know, could be something used for just turning lights or on and off or something like that, or when a light was turned off or something like that. So there's different ways you could do that, and there could be some benefits of having that pulled into the site itself. You know, thinking of views and some of the other applications that you could, or some of the other modules and things that you'll be able to do there. Would be nice if it were in the database, but. So yeah, this file is here. Now, the next thing, so if you go in here, and actually we're seeing this here. So the next thing, so that is, this is Drupal reaching out to the server, to the broker, grabbing the data, pulling that back in. Now with this setup, it's essentially just taking this data and automatically graphing it. So earlier in our conversation, we were talking about some of the roadmap items that we want to do. That everybody will be graphing data like this. So I wanted to have this as an optional thing rather than sort of a out of the box sort of a configuration. So there's some more revisions we need to make for it. We can push it to Drupal.org, but yeah. And then so this is a subscription, pulling data into Drupal. Now there's also, if you wanted to take data out of Drupal and push that, say, back to a broker, could be a lot of reasons why you want to do that. In this case, I used rules. So pretty much anything that was based in rules, you'd be able to react on. So with rules, I've got a, so I'll add a new reaction. I'll edit one of those, but with MQTT, and just saw it. Just need to. So whenever the subscription is retrieved is the way it's set up now. So if you don't remember, a subscription is retrieved, that is a rules event that is brought with this module. So I already have one set up here for checking the temperature. And in this case, you know, the subscriptions are retrieved. I'm going to run a data comparison, and I essentially just want to look and make sure that the subscription name is test temperature. And this is sort of getting into one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of rules, because there's Drupal 7, there's a lot more on the development side that you could do to clean this interface up, but not as many options with Drupal 8, the Drupal 8 release of rules. So going to move into proper subscriptions and events. So where we're going anyway, but yeah, so we have the data comparison. We just want to react on if, you know, on that test temperature. And whenever this happens, we want to, you know, just check a, you know, show a message on the site, which I have no message, so you won't see anything there. But the big thing here is publish to a broker. So if we take a look at this, we're going to essentially publish back to the same broker, and we're going to publish to a new subscription, and then this is the message that we're going to send. So one thing that could be, so these types of devices, this one I have set up with the sensor, and it's grabbing sensor data and it's submitting it back to a broker. But you could very easily hook this up to a relay, and what that relay would allow you to do. So Stephen mentioned, you know, turning on and off lights and things like that. But, you know, it could be that. It could be, you know, pretty much anything with power that uses 110, you know, you could, or, you know, 12 volts too. I mean, like there's, you know, there's a lot of applications that you could use to, you know, wire up something in your home. I mean, there's even integrations with like Philips Hue and some other things there, but a lot of services use MQTT. But this case, just to sort of serve the thing, I'm just pushing to this new subscription, test/Drupal, and the message I'm just putting hello SE Doug, and we've actually already seen it happen a couple of times here. Now I have Drupal set to run cron. Actually, I have it on cron tab to run this cron every 3 minutes. So this is why we actually see it here a few times. So this is separated by 3 minutes, and we've had a few times when I manually ran cron earlier to sort of demonstrate how it was updating. That's why we see 2 of them listed here. But if I were to go back here and essentially just go back to my reports page and status report and run cron, what we should see is another hello SE Doug right as cron finishes. So it's still running. There it is there. SE Doug. And the benefit of this is that anything that's happening on your Drupal site, any type of event, any type of code, or I had set up with rules. So for one example could be like if you had an e-commerce store and when an order is placed on your site, or if a new order is placed on your site, it maybe rings a bell or something in your warehouse. I'm not sure, but I thought that'd be kind of a cute little implementation of it, I guess. But or turn on a light, new sale light, or new shipping or new order or something like that to sort of notify you. It allows you to sort of bridge that gap between from your website to the real world through all sorts of different applications that you can use through MQTT. So yeah, there's my message, check the temperature. And yeah, trying to think. Yes, so this is the module, Will Jackson, or github.com/Will Jackson/MQTT. This is the module in its current status. Eventually, it will be on Drupal.org/project/MQTT.
Are you not a fan of their GitLab instance?
What's that?
Are you not a fan of Drupal's GitLab instance?
Yeah, so that's also part of it too. I've got to get it on board with that. I got to get that set up. I need to look into, one of the libraries that I used. So where it was this from Carp47, works great, but it's just not as well supported. I need to switch out to a whole different library too that actually supports the newer version of MQTT and has a little bit more support. So there are a few other major things that I need to do. But if you were to start using this module today, if you were to just upgrade it, use it now and then upgrade it up to, from the version of that'll eventually be on Drupal.org, it would still work. I mean, there'd be an upgrade path from there. If not, I mean, I'll provide a little sign. There's like 2 people using this whole thing. So.
I get it's totally an in-development thing. I was just asking why GitHub over Drupal's GitLab instance.
Yeah. Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I'm used to GitHub. I mean, I'm just went there first.
Yeah. So. I mean, truthfully, I'm still coming around to a world where we can submit merge requests on our own repo and on Drupal.org.
Yeah. There's a lot I needed to learn about that because I haven't used it. I mean, I haven't really used it much at all yet. So it's more of
go back to the project page. Scroll down. There's the browse code repository under development in the right tab. I'll give them credit. It largely just works.
Nice. Yeah, I will have to look more into this because one other thing too is that prior to actually getting this namespace, MQTT, it was MQTT_subscribe. I was reaching out with the maintainer Gansel there. So I was doing that too. So I had a whole different namespace, and there was a lot of stuff that was sort of changing from MQTT subscribe to MQTT, and I didn't want to have like, here's 300 commits over the weekend of just like little changes and then things I broke and then it unbroke, so it was a way that I could sort of squash everything. Here's one sort of pre-alpha release when I push it. But when it goes to Drupal.org, I want it to mostly be a usable thing. I mean, there might be some, further down the lines or roadmap ideas and things that I want to implement, but for the most part, I want it to be complete at that point, or release candidate anyway. Yeah, so that's it for the demo. Are there any questions?
Well, you just mentioned your roadmap. Is
Yeah.
that roadmap documented in the project somewhere, or is it just a?
It's not. It's more. It will be soon. I need to go through the project itself and essentially just populate the issue queue of a few items. The biggest thing, timeline. It's really within the next month or so, trying to get everything pushed over to Drupal.org. So I can kind of get this one, just get it on, get it on Drupal.org and that release candidate thing. As far as roadmap, yeah, the main item is just sort of more testing, because I was just mentioning kind of going from MQTT subscribed to MQTT, just some more thorough testing there, making sure everything is still working as it's expected. The subscriptions and subscriptions and events within Drupal, I want to get that implemented too, because that'll allow it to be Drupal 9 ready as well. So that's another piece of that. And then switching over to other libraries. So those are the three major things that I would hope to do, or hoping to get done, or aiming to get done prior to Drupal.org release.
When you were showing the rule you were creating to do the publish, could you pass values? I mean, you just had a hard-coded string there that you were passing. I'm assuming you could take an incoming value and do something in the rule and pass it out, publish it out. So in the action part down there somewhere.
Yeah. So data comparison in this case, I'm just checking I'm checking the subscription, but you could also get the value itself and then save that. I'll save that to a variable and then put that out to, or no, you wouldn't be able to do that. Yeah, with rules, it's just kind of limited as what you can get to do with rules. But so in this case, I'm just checking a temperature. You could have another one to say the value. So in this, for the temperature, if it's above a certain degree or below a certain degree, you'd have that as part of the condition. And then as far as the action, in this case, is published to a broker. And then in here, you have to select the entity itself. In this case, it's just where the reference to that, and this is just from the subscription. So from the subscription that it was checking, so it's posting back to the same broker in this case. And in this case, what subscription are you posting to? In this test Drupal, and then whatever value you're posting to. Now, one of the things I would like to do, or one of my, I won't say complaints, but there used to be a lot more you could do with rules in earlier versions of rules, like Drupal 7. It's just the flexibility from the development side is just not as vast as it used to be with Drupal 7, Drupal 8 rules. Support's not there. There's just not many people using it. So unfortunately, there's just not as much I could do as far as cleaning it up. I just spent a lot of time going through trying to build a new UI, trying to do something with your rules to make it a little more useful, or at least for this project anyway. One of the other things I wanted to add for rule support, because I could still include it in case it's, in case the site did use rules. I would like to include it. If possible for the D8 version, but it would be like a check system time, because one of the things that I wanted to do, or at least one of the things I wanted to do here, or at least in my home, was have an easy way that I can manage all of my smart lights. So if it's a certain time of day, or if there is a photo sensor, so I can have a Wemos Mini or something similar to what I have here, but instead of having a temperature and humidity sensor, I can have a photo cell, and that photo cell will let me know how bright it is outside, essentially letting me know if it's a day or night. That's the kind of base thing that I'm getting after. So if it's nighttime, then I could turn on the lights. And then if it's past a certain time, I don't want to keep my neighbors up, then I want to turn the lights off. So some basic things like that I envisioned being able to kind of easily do with the rules integration that we have here. The only thing that in that scenario that I just described, the only thing that I'm missing is really a way to check the time. There isn't a way to kind of do that as a condition right now, or at least not that I'm aware of. We could do like some custom code, and that's essentially the route I'm gonna go, is create a way, a custom condition that just checks the time. But I want to look into it, see if there was any other better options on having to do that. It seems so generic to add that one condition for the, for this one use case, but But did I answer the question, or?
Yeah, you did answer that one.
Okay.
You said you were going to get away from rules and go to something else, and that's something else I missed. I'm not familiar with what that was either. I've not spent much time on this side of Drupal, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, it's subscribe and dispatch events within Drupal, and this is just a core. So event subscribers and event dispatchers in context. So essentially using.
Go ahead,
Chris. No, you go ahead.
I was just saying it's using the same exact pattern of MQTT. It's like the message observer pattern. It'll emit an event. Anything that's subscribed to that event can take that, consume it, and do something with it.
Okay.
But yeah,
unfortunately, it's all in code.
And this is more where Drupal's headed. I mean, this is a replacement for rules, or
yeah, Will's pain is kind of echoed across several of the community projects. I don't know, it's painful to say, but I feel like we've lost a lot of the community projects that were great out of the box from Drupal 7 and 6. Drupal 8 is much more geared towards enterprise, and 9 is as well. So we don't have a lot of rules integrations. We've got this really clean, efficient, performant thing you have to code yourself.
Now, in regards to the module, the MQTT module, all that would be coded as part of the module. So essentially, there would be an interface. So if you're familiar with rules, it would be very similar to that. But it would, think of it almost like a custom rules interface built specifically for the module itself, so that all the features, all of the all the context, all of the dispatchers and everything that's related to that would be very specific to MQTT and the sort of things that you'll be using MQTT for. So the one thing about rules is that, like, I've set my MQTT subscriptions are retrieved, but then if I want to add a new condition, there really isn't a clear thing to do here. I mean, like, my condition is the node of a what type. That doesn't really make sense, or some of these things. So really the only thing is like data comparison in this case. So data comparison, if I select that, I can see my subscription, and then I can pull in the properties of that entity, because the subscription and the brokers, they're their own custom entities. So you can pull in all the stuff that Drupal would associate it with an entity, like an owner that's published when it was created. But it also pulls in, so in this case, I'm pulling in the broker because I was checking. I can do a specific broker, or the name, or the value itself. Where is that?
Does rules support tokens at all? I mean, rules in D8.
I don't think it does.
That's a shame. That'd get you there.
Yeah, there's the whole UI. Subscription status. I forgot where I put it here, but essentially you can kind of get the idea. You can tap into that entity itself, kind of do some things on it, but with the replacement of what we would want to build with, subscribe, the actual subscriptions, events, and everything that's sort of documented here, we would be building an interface exclusively for MQTT. So it'll all be managed within, it's kind of own UI as opposed to something specific, kind of more broad, like what rules is intended for.
I have an MQTT question,
Sure.
just in general. The names that you chose, the test/Drupal, I can't remember the other two, but you had three names. They seem to just, I guess I've been doing this programming a long time. I expect names to be something special, and all the examples are like foo/whatever, and I always hate when people do that, because that basically means they're not going to explain why they decided on that name.
Yeah.
Is the name of this I guess I'm going to call it the entity, but that's the wrong term. Go back to where you set that up in the subscription. Yeah, that name, test/temperature, test/whatever. I mean, is there magic to the test/ part, or is that really just everybody's going to do their own thing, and there's no need for there to be any consistency with that between my project and your project? Or
So for MQTT, this is definitely an MQTT thing. Slash, so like your different subscriptions, this is something that's you can go into, almost think of it like directories, so like you have, I chose test because I was testing. So I just put test. So I'll make a test directory, and then slash, like a subdirectory, a subscription. In a lot of times there are some applications used for like browsing and pulling down those messages. And a lot of times you'll be kind of navigating through it like a file structure, and that's the slash part. So you have your, think of it like a parent directory and then a child directory, and you can go further down too, and you can nest them. I'm sure there is a limit. I'm not sure how deep, I haven't looked into how what that limit is, but you can go more than that too. But essentially this is, for me, test, I was just testing. So I just put test, and then temperature. And the nice thing, and the thing in my head, I could have just put temperature and I could have just put humidity. That would have worked just fine, and wouldn't made a bunch of difference at all. When I ran this one command initially, being able to look, I wanted to look for anything in the test directory. So I wanted to see everything at once, as opposed to I'm just checking temperature, I'm just testing humidity, and then Drupal, because I published back to it from the Drupal site. So that's why this is showing up here too. But in this case, it's just showing me everything, test slash star, or essentially it's wildcard, anything.
And that name is in effect hard coded into your Node MCU code as well, not
correct. So
those names just need to match whatever.
Correct.
If you took the test out and went with temperature and humidity, you'd need to make that change on both sides, and that's
exactly.
Exactly. We're not avoiding a collision with something else, because these devices are, I guess in general, they're so specialized that you're not likely to come along in a year and try to add some other application in there that used the word temperature and
right.
broke your thing,
Yeah, it would override it. It would be a huge pain. Exactly. You would want to have something if you were putting this into production. So like if you were to create a lot of these modules and then deploy them in different places, you'd probably want to have something a little more, unique for that situation. But there's no requirements on the MQT side or anything. So like if I had a second device, if I had two of these and then or built another one, and then it was posting back to the same test slash temperature, just the most recent version or the most recent message that I would have would be there and be returned.
Okay. And in that case, you could add more to the topic that had some specific thing for this node versus another node, right?
Exactly.
You'd use that one string as an addressing scheme.
Exactly.
Of some sort. Okay. It seems like it's very, very powerful, but it's also with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
And kind of just doesn't seem rigid as I want it to be, but I guess it's not supposed to be. That's kind of right.
Yeah, and a lot of this too. So like that was just the interface that I set up for it. When doing the code, that was just sort of just trying to get something posting and something that was working, out there. But there are, so like with Arduino itself, there are some other applications that you could use. For example, like I went with a web server, the Wi-Fi to connect the Wi-Fi DHT sensor. That's just connecting to the sensor itself. And then this is everything for MQTT, pub sub client. So that's pretty much everything. I could really just rip this out now that I know it's working. But yeah, this is just adding a little web server that you can see that. So I don't know the IP address of this one, or otherwise I can show it to you, but it's just a basic HTML page. It says like temperature, humidity, and so temperature and then humidity. But so yeah.
Can you push a message back to the queue from Drupal? If you like hypothetically consume something, tried to process it, like try to open a relay or do something, it failed, could you stick it back into the brokerage queue to be consumed again?
Yeah, well, because I mean, if you think to like this right here, it's sending a message back to that. So in the instance where like if you had a relay and you wanted to turn something off, and if well, you would have to have something on your board side, so a basic relay. I mean, that wouldn't give you any type. I mean, it's just on or off. But say, I mean, you could use your imagination. I mean, if there is some sort of other sensor that you had on there that, you know, gave you either a Boolean or, you know, maybe a temperature reading, a photon, or, you know, light level or something like that, you know, any type of data. Just as this is submitting to, you know, MQTT, the device could too. And so that would be going back to Drupal. So in this case, we could, so right now I'm just pulling all this data and putting it as a graph. So that was one of the things I wanted to do, was not force everybody to put the data to a graph, because not everybody's graphing data. So in that instance, yeah, you would be able to do that. I mean, you would be able to do that. I wanted to have a field that has like last message, or I think last testament's what I call it, but there's the message there, that the most recent one that it's pulled in that would save. So you can just have that as a status. There are a few things that you could do with that. I mean, it kind of depending on the application, but short answer for I guess would be yes.
Nice.
I got a question for you, Will, about the broker setup itself.
Yeah.
You're not creating a broker in that UI. You're telling Drupal this broker exists, right?
Exactly. This is where this broker is.
Okay. So somewhere else in MQTT or on the Node.m, somewhere you defined that broker outside of this, and here you're just telling Drupal there's this thing.
This is where it is, right? So the let me see if I've got this open. So this is the project, and let me close that. And as I say, I'm using Doxel for this. So if I go into my Doxel YAML, like this is where I'm defining, like this is the entire, you know, MQTT service, or, you know, server that's running. So this is port, you know, 1884 that I'm publicly exposing, and I'm routing that to 1883, and I'm exposing that. And this is more Docker Compose sort of a thing, but this is just me kind of wiring it into my existing LAMP stack that comes with Doxel. So by setting this up, I'm using this image. So it's using this Mosquito image there. And then if I go back to, wait, did I override it? No, I didn't. So yeah, so it's just Eclipse Mosquito. That's where it's grabbing the image from. And that is, so that is just this image that it's using. So this is the setup part of it. So kind of out of the box, I've also got this here. So if you go to Etsy, the Mosquito, this mosquito.conf, it's essentially the entire configuration file. If you want to change any configuration with Mosquito, and this is just more of a, you know, an MQTT setup. You know, you could also, you know, if you have a Linux server or something, you could go easily just download, you know, Eclipse Mosquito. So you could just very easily come here and download and get this and do it too. I'm just using the container in this case, and it was easier to kind of wire everything up within Doxel. But yeah, so that's where all of this is how the broker is being created, and then in Drupal, all I'm doing is saying this is where the broker is. So you can actually add as many brokers as you need. It could be locally, it could be running on a remote server, it could be running on the internet, it could be running anywhere, just anywhere that you have an access to, or TCP access to. You could also have, go ahead.
And then each subscription has exactly one broker. I mean, it's tied to a broker. So
yeah, exactly.
If you added another broker and you need to add some more subscriptions to take advantage of that, yeah, pick it from that little list there. I see. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I guess the same thing was on the Node MCU side. It pointed to that same server, that same broker.
Yeah, so it looks a little different here, because instead of having an IP address, so
Right.
with because this is the broker itself, I'm using Mosquito, or that's the DNS. Because if I were to go into here and then just fin bash, so this would be like the command line of the server. So if I do ping Mosquito, it'll resolve to whatever IP address it is.
Right.
And that's what Doxel's doing. It's handling that DNS for me. So all I have to remember is just call it Mosquito. And so that's their port 1883. This is because it's within the Docker network, or the Docker network that gets created. So it will actually see port 1883, which is defined in here. So this would be like the local port with that Docker Compose stack, if that makes sense. And then to the public, and by public I mean just my LAN, because I don't have anything publicly routed to 1884. But on my LAN, I can access this service via port 1884, which is why in this Arduino sketch, I am, I've got a map here to 1884. That's the IP address of my dev server that everything's running on. So that's the computer that, excuse me, that's the computer that's is running Doxel in the project. Yeah.
And those are just external addresses, because whereas the other ones were internal addresses to the Docker environment there. So okay, I
Right.
understand. So if I put this on my DigitalOcean server, they would both point to the exact same port and the exact same IP or exact same name.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
work the same way. That if I was running Mosquito on my DigitalOcean server.
Correct. Yeah, and you could have this set up too. So instead of having like a local IP, you could have that WAN IP. Whatever that DigitalOcean server is, have up some. So I was going really low security on this, and I have a username and password or anything like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so this is just connecting locally. And because this is not, I mean, obviously this thing is not on the Docker network or the Docker Compose network. So like everything in, so these 4 containers are on a Docker network. So that's how I can go into the the CLI container, type ping Mosquito, and then it'll ping that. Right. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't put Mosquito on here because it's not part of that network, so it doesn't have that DNS that built in there. So I had to put the IP address of the actual machine that's running Doxel, and by setting up this remote, exposing this 1884 and routing that to 1883, that allows me to take this and connect to that virtual, that Docker, or those Docker containers, which are here. But because this site, like the actual Drupal site here, this is running on as part of that network, that's why I can run Mosquito here as opposed to having to put 192. I could, and you could put 192.168.1.1.1, the same thing there, and it would still work. But I'll have to change this port to 1884 in that case if I were to do that. So.
Okay, I mean that makes sense. I understand that.
All right. So,
That's all the questions I can think of.
Awesome.
I'm out.